We stand for Charlie. We stand for the truth. God bless you kindly. Stay back and listen carefully to this new investigation in progress. They weren't supposed to be found, not by the public, not by the press, and certainly not by the court of conscience that would one day demand to see them. Tucked inside a mislabeled archive folder, buried beneath weeks of digital clutter, sat a series of internal communications that changed everything we thought we knew about that afternoon at Utah Valley University. These weren't rumors, or theories, or whispered secrets passed from one newsroom to another. They were documents, stamped, timed, and signed. Some by staff members whose jobs were to protect, others by contractors whose only role was to observe. And inside those pages, silence spoke the loudest. Please, before we continue, never forget to drop your contribution. Please, please, and please drop your comment as you listening to this new updates. We would definitely respond to all comment. We will be glad to hear your feedbacks on this report. We stand for truth. We stand for Charlie. They tell of a system that hesitated when it should have acted, of warnings marked low priority, of requests left unread until it was too late. Charlie Kirk was already on stage that day, addressing a hall full of supporters. The crowd cheered, unaware that somewhere in the background, an access alert had gone unresolved. One message, one ignored notification, one small gap between responsibility and reaction. Hours later, Tyler Robinson would be taken into custody, accused of taking the life that those very systems were meant to safeguard. But before that moment, the paper trail was already writing its own quiet confession. When investigators retrieved those hidden records, what they found wasn't a single act of malice. It was a chain of overlooked duties, emails unanswered, authorizations skipped, safety checks postponed. No conspiracies, no grand schemes, just human decisions, the kind that hide behind protocol and procedure, and somehow still lead to devastation. Each page feels less like evidence and more like a mirror, a reflection of how easily caution becomes convenience and how the cost of indifference is always paid by the one who never saw it coming. These documents don't accuse, they expose. They remind every official, every planner, every decision maker. That tragedy doesn't always erupt from chaos. Sometimes it grows quietly through the spaces where responsibility used to live. And now, as the courtroom battles continue and prosecutors build their case against Tyler Robinson, these overlooked pages whisper a different story. Not of guilt or innocence, but of a system that failed its own promise of vigilance. The question isn't just what happened on stage that day, it's who knew and turned the page anyway. What do you think? Is the case moving forward carefully, or is progress being slowed by procedural delays? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That's where we hear your thought. Hughes, we will definitely respond to all comment, and also make sure you comment where you're watching from. To stay updated on every development, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and also don't hesitate to support this movement so you stay informed as new update becomes available. This is Detective Max, and together we fight for justice. But here's what makes those pages impossible to ignore. Each warning was timestamped, reviewed, and quietly archived by someone with a verified login. That means the alerts were seen, acknowledged, and then filed away as non-urgent. One entry in particular stands out. Clearance anomaly detected. Temporary access extension granted. Temporary access. For who and why remains unclear. But the authorization code tied to that entry? It traces back to the morning of the event, hours before Charlie Kirk even took the stage. And in the world of security, that kind of approval doesn't happen on its own. It requires human consent. A click, a sign-off. A decision made in the quiet space between assumption and accountability. What followed next was a pattern too precise to dismiss. The same access extension appeared in 3 separate reports, each pointing to the same zone, the rear maintenance corridor, a passageway that, according to the venue map, should have remained locked. But according to these records, it wasn't. Then there's the silence that follows. No follow-up ticket, no corrective log, no confirmation that the breach was contained. Just a note in plain text. Issue closed, no threat detected. That's it. A sentence that looks harmless on paper, until you remember what happened just hours later, and that's where guilt takes on a quieter form, because this isn't the story of villains in the dark. It's the story of professionals doing what they've always done, moving past warnings because routine feels safer than reflection. One small choice at a desk miles away, and a chain of consequences that would echo through a nation. When investigators traced the file history, they noticed something else. The first upload of the post-event review documents didn't come from the event's main office. It came from a personal account, someone trying to preserve what others had already begun to forget. That anonymous act may be the only reason the truth survived. Because while official reports focused on public reassurance, these quiet documents tell a different story. Of neglected responsibility, of hesitation disguised as procedure, and of moments that slipped away while everyone waited for someone else to act. It's easy to speak of justice in the courtroom, but it's harder to face the quiet accountability buried in digital logs and access sheets. Each one holds a signature, a timestamp, a trace of human choice. And each one reminds us that systems don't fail on their own. They fail through people who stopped believing their small decisions mattered. That's the real discovery. Not a secret plot, not a grand cover-up, but a culture of comfort, where warnings are read, dismissed, and forgotten until it's far too late. She wasn't a decision maker, not a high-ranking officer or an executive voice, just a coordinator, young, meticulous, and too committed to be ignored. Her duty was to cross-check access logs before each major event. And when something didn't align, she did what any responsible staff member would do. She reported it. But somewhere between her alert and the chain of command, the message lost weight. Her email was acknowledged, flagged for review, and then archived. No follow-up, no escalation, no verification. Hours later, she sent another note. Still seeing unauthorized pings. Can someone recheck clearance list? That one was marked handled, though nothing in the logs suggested ever was Nace. And then, like so many truths that come too early, her name vanished from the record. Every public release of the internal report replaced it with a black strip. Coordinator, redacted for privacy. Privacy or protection? That's the quiet question no one seems eager to answer. Because those who saw the unedited version say her note didn't just identify the issue, it predicted the outcome. Her message ended with 5 simple words. If unchecked, this could spread. Spread. She wasn't talking about panic. She was talking about access, the kind that moves from one credential to another until no one knows who's real anymore. And yet, instead of alarm, there was calm. Instead of a system pause, there was a schedule to keep, a timeline to protect, a reputation to maintain. The coordinator's warning was filed as non-urgent, because in the rhythm of large events, disruption feels costly and silence feels safe. That choice, quiet, procedural, and polite, became the pivot point of the entire chain of failure, the moment where prevention gave way to convenience. What happened to her after that? No one can say for certain. Some claim she resigned weeks later. Others say she was reassigned quietly, without recognition or reprimand. But her absence in every subsequent document says enough. The system didn't just redact her name, it erased her caution. And now, the cost of that silence isn't just written in reports, it's carried by every unanswered question that follows. It's easy to look back and say someone should have done more, but guilt isn't always born in malice. Sometimes it lives in delay, in that fragile moment when someone decides that one unchecked warning won't make a difference. Yet it always does, because history isn't written by the loudest voices. It's written by the ones we chose not to hear. It's hard to imagine how much can unfold in 2 minutes, but when those 2 minutes vanish, not erased, just missing, they take the truth with them. According to the vendor's log, the west rear corridor feed glitched at 2:16 p.m. The same corridor that, according to internal schedules, was supposed to remain sealed for staff transition only. At first glance, the interruption looked routine, a common signal drop, the kind that happens in crowded buildings or during bandwidth strain. But this wasn't a busy hallway. It was quiet, controlled. And yet, that's where the screen went black. When the feed returned at 2:18 p.m., the timestamp rolled forward smoothly. No skip, no replay. But the visual field had changed. One object that was visible before the glitch, a maintenance cart, was gone. In its place, a faint reflection appeared on the far wall. The reflection of movement. Not enough to identify. Just enough to remind investigators that something, or someone, had been there. The report called it insufficient visual data, the kind of phrasing that sounds harmless, but really means we saw it, but we can't explain it. Requests were filed for backup data, external drives, cloud syncs, alternate angles from the east corridor, but the reply came back the same each time: no additional footage found. That's where the questions deepened, because in a venue wired with over 20 active cameras, only one, the west rear feed, glitched in that exact 2-minute window. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences tend to multiply when accountability thins out. Technicians later admitted the system refresh request had been left pending. It wasn't denied, it just waited for approval that never came. And by the time anyone noticed, the event was already in motion. One technician described it as a moment of hesitation. No one wanted to reboot the system mid-operation. No one wanted to take the blame if something went wrong. So they chose the quieter option, to wait. And in that wait, 2 minutes slipped away forever. Maybe the feed drop was just a technical flaw. Maybe it was a coincidence in a long list of them. But when those 2 minutes overlap with the most critical moment of a public event, when questions of safety and procedure are at stake, the meaning changes. It stops being a glitch and becomes a mirror. A reflection of what happens when systems designed for vigilance become systems built for comfort. And now, every unanswered frame feels like a silent reminder that the smallest gaps often hold the biggest truths. Silence has a way of sounding heavier when it follows a trail of evidence. That backup drive, once logged, signed, and verified, should have been one of the most secure pieces in the entire chain, but somewhere between storage and transfer, it simply disappeared. The records show everything up until the handoff: barcodes scanned, forms signed, chain of custody confirmed, and then nothing. No note of where it went next, no signature marking its arrival, no timestamp showing who last accessed it. For investigators, this kind of gap isn't just frustrating, it's defining. Because when footage goes missing, so does the chance to settle what's truth and what's theory. And yet, in every official statement released since, the tone remains calm, procedural, almost routine. Phrases like technical loss, irretrievable sector, and storage malfunction take the place of accountability. Words that sound clean, but carry the quiet weight of what isn't being said. Someone, somewhere, made a decision. Not necessarily to hide, but not to dig deeper either. One internal message from the data contractor reads, "Our last successful validation ping occurred before the handover." Translation: the drive was still functioning when it left their hands. Everything after that point becomes a fog of paperwork and polite uncertainty. When questioned, representatives pointed to possible mislabeling, a mix-up in shipment IDs, a clerical oversight, a missing link in an otherwise tidy chain. But mislabels don't erase digital traces. And this one had none. Imagine being the person who notices the gap first, the one who scrolls through logs, realizes the reference number stops midline, and feels that quiet drop in their chest. The realization that something vital has slipped away, not stolen, not destroyed, just unaccounted for. That's the kind of loss that doesn't make headlines, because it isn't loud. It's bureaucratic, orderly, almost invisible. But for the families, the supporters, the ones seeking truth, those missing frames feel louder than anything that remains. Later, when asked if recovery efforts were made, a spokesperson said the footage was unlikely to provide meaningful clarity. Unlikely, not impossible, just inconvenient. And that word, inconvenient, might be the most haunting one in this entire case. Because it suggests a choice to move forward without answers, to label uncertainty as closure, and to let silence carry what truth no longer could. Now, the missing footage stands as more than just a technical lapse. It's a symbol of how easy it is for accountability to fade when comfort takes its place, of how evidence, once considered vital, can be reduced to a footnote when the questions become too uncomfortable. Those 2 vanished minutes may never return, but the responsibility tied to them doesn't vanish with the drive. It lingers. In every file stamped no retrievable data, in every unanswered inquiry, and in every quiet heart that still wonders what was on that screen. 2 simple words: practical, procedural, harmless on paper. And yet, in the timeline of this case, they echo like a quiet admission. Because that email chain doesn't show panic, it shows confidence, the kind built from routine. Staff acknowledging a warning, seeing the risk, and still deciding it could wait. Not because they didn't care, but because in their world, issues always get handled after. After the speeches, after the applause, after the cameras are off and the lights dim. That's when accountability usually begins, and sometimes that's too late. The conversation thread stretches across 5 replies, each one polite, composed, and detached. Noted. Will review post-event. System glitch appears contained. No urgency, no escalation, no one daring to say, we need to stop. And that's where the guilt hides, not in what they said, but in what they didn't, because silence often sounds professional. It feels safe. It looks responsible. Until it isn't. When investigators later reviewed the chain, they noticed something subtle. No one ever replied to close the loop. No follow-up confirming the issue was resolved. Just silence. A full stop where accountability should have continued. That's the kind of silence that doesn't fade with time. It lingers in inboxes, in forwarded threads, in every document marked completed when, in truth, nothing was. Inside the security clearance documents, 2 signatures appear. Neither individual has publicly commented. Their initials authorize reduced staff deployment near the service gate, the same gate later marked as unsecured. One of them, according to later inquiry records, was filling in for a supervisor who had called out sick. That's how oversight happens, not through malice, but through substitution. A quiet approval here, a forgotten reminder there, and a line of duty left half fulfilled. An internal memo dated September 12th reads, pending review of footage anomalies and physical entry inconsistencies. The tone is clinical, but the meaning is unmistakable. Someone knew things didn't align. It wasn't about guilt or motive. It was about missing data, misplaced accountability, and unanswered questions. And 2 days after that memo, an internal follow-up simply reads, closed until further notice. No closure report, no findings attached, just a closure note with no conclusion. Behind these documents are people, the ones who carried boxes of cables, checked name tags, managed lighting, and watched the crowd. Some of them now speak in whispers, afraid of being blamed for the gaps they didn't create. Others stay silent, knowing that bureaucracy always protects itself first. You read through the pages and see a pattern. Not a cover-up, but a collapse of attention. Not one massive failure, but 1,000 tiny hesitations, the kind that make tragedy possible, even predictable. Accountability isn't about one suspect or one event. It's about everyone who held a key, a password, a clearance code, and looked the other way because their shift was ending or their phone buzzed. The tragedy might have unfolded in seconds, but the setup took days, of unchecked warnings, delayed replies, and silent approvals. And the question now isn't just who pulled the trigger, but who left the gate open? When the last file closes and the evidence room light dims, what's left isn't just paperwork, it's a mirror. A reminder that behind every preventable moment, there were people who could have acted, but didn't. We look for villains in stories like this, but sometimes it's not about villains at all. It's about bystanders, professionals who assumed someone else was watching. And maybe that's the hardest truth to face, that this wasn't a mystery hidden in the dark. It was one hidden in plain sight, inside the documents we chose not to read. Stand for the truth. We stand and love. Charlie Kirk. God bless you.